The morning sunlight spilled across the city like a golden tide, but Olivia Hayes carried a storm inside her. To the world, she was untouchable, a CEO in her late 30s who moved through boardrooms with precision and authority. Her posture was flawless, her wardrobe immaculate, her voice steady in every meeting. She was the woman executives pointed to as proof that discipline could conquer chaos. Yet here, at the edge of the playground, she sat on a wooden bench clutching her phone, not to scroll, not to work, but to shield herself. It was her invisible armor against the pitying glances of other parents who knew, or thought they knew, her story. Her daughter Emily, 7 years old, sat alone on a swing just a few feet away. The chain links creaked with the faintest movement, though the girl herself hardly moved at all. Her small fingers clung to the cool metal, her legs hanging stiff, her lips pressed together in a silence that had lasted 3 long years. Once, Emily had been a child of endless questions, her laugh bubbling like a song. But then came the accident, an afternoon that shattered their lives like glass. And since then, not a single word had passed her lips. Olivia tried not to remember that day, but it haunted every quiet moment. The doctors had called it selective mutism brought on by trauma. Therapists had tried games, music, endless patience. Specialists had offered devices and programs, promises wrapped in clinical language. Olivia had bought them all. She had sat through sterile rooms filled with laminated charts, watched strangers coax her child with toys and candy, and left each session emptier than the last. Nothing worked. Nothing broke the silence. Now, on this Saturday morning, Olivia pretended. She pretended that she was just another mother on another ordinary day at the park. She pretended that she was watching her daughter play, not walk him home. The weight of silence smother her little girl's childhood. Around them, children shrieked with joy, chasing each other down slides and across the grass. Parents called out reminders, laughed, snapped photos. It was a scene painted in vibrant sound and life, and yet Olivia and Emily sat at its edge, like figures in a photograph left unfinished. Olivia lowered her phone to her lap, forcing herself to breathe. The sharp scent of freshly cut grass filled the air, the kind of smell that used to make Emily wrinkle her nose and giggle. The memory clawed at Olivia's chest, and she blinked hard, refusing to let tears rise here in public. She had trained herself to be strong, to keep her spine straight and her chin high even as everything crumbled beneath her feet. But strength in the boardroom didn't translate to strength here, where the only battle was with silence. Every so often, Olivia glanced at her daughter, searching for some flicker, an eye movement, a twitch of her mouth that might hint at words trying to push through. But Emily's face remained still, carved in a quiet that seemed older than her years. Olivia's stomach tightened with the familiar dread. What if this is forever? What if her daughter never spoke again? The merry-go-round squeaked in the distance, turning with the laughter of children clinging to its edges. Emily turned her head slightly at the sound, her hair catching the light like a pale ribbon. For a split second, Olivia's heart leapt, thinking maybe, just maybe, something stirred. But the moment passed and Emily's eyes fell back to the ground, her hands gripping the swing's chain tighter. Olivia pressed her phone against her leg, nails digging into her palm. She hated herself for pretending. She hated the mask she wore, the casual smile she offered when coworkers asked about Emily, the way she told friends they were working through it as if silence were a project with a deadline. But beneath it all was the truth she could never voice aloud. She was terrified. Terrified that her daughter was lost in a world she couldn't reach, and that all her power, her money, her brilliance meant nothing here. The playground was alive with sound, but for Olivia and Emily, it was a vacuum, an island of quiet surrounded by noise. And somewhere deep inside, Olivia knew this Saturday would not be like the others. Something was about to happen. The weight of silence had lasted too long, and silence has a way of cracking when the right force leans against it. She didn't know it yet, but the moment was coming. The moment when a stranger's voice, warm, patient, and steady, would reach into the silence and pull her daughter back into the world. And when it happened, it would break Olivia Hayes wide open. The sunlight shifted through the trees, dappled patches of gold moving across the grass as if the morning itself couldn't sit still. Olivia sat frozen in her seat, her eyes locked on Emily's fragile frame, the swing chains rattling softly in the breeze. She had grown so used to this routine, come to the park, sit on the bench, pretend this was normal, that her body went through the motions even as her heart refused to believe any of it was enough. Then a sound broke through the blur of noise around her. It wasn't the shrill laughter of children or the squeak of the merry-go-round. It was something deeper, warmer. A laugh, rich and unforced, that carried across the playground like sunlight finding a hidden corner. Olivia's head turned without her permission. Near the tire swing, a man was pushing a little boy about Emily's age. The boy's legs flailed with joy as he swung higher, but Olivia's gaze stayed on the man. He was in his 30s, tall but not imposing, his posture relaxed in a way that seemed out of place in a world that thrummed with hurry. His hoodie was faded navy, the sleeves pushed up to reveal strong, scarred forearms. His jeans were worn at the knees. There was nothing polished about him, no signs of wealth or power, yet the ease in his movements, the way his laughter seemed to ripple outward and soften the air, made Olivia notice him the way she hadn't noticed anyone in a long time. The boy on the tire swing let out a whoop, and the man's laugh followed, low and steady, like a note in harmony with the world. Something about it made Olivia shift on her bench, a strange tightening in her chest. It was the kind of laugh that didn't demand attention but drew it anyway. The swing slowed, the boy hopping down, his small sneakers thudding in the grass. The man ruffled the boy's hair, then glanced up. His eyes caught Olivia's, just for a heartbeat. He gave a polite nod, neither presumptuous nor timid, before guiding his son across the playground. And that's when Olivia realized they weren't just passing through, they were headed toward Emily. Her body stiffened, instinct sharp. Strangers had approached before, with good intentions wrapped in awkward smiles. Most tried too hard, asking Emily questions she wouldn't answer, leaning too close, making promises of friendship or games. Each attempt had ended with Olivia stepping in, rescuing her daughter from the pressure, from the weight of expectation she couldn't carry. The result was always the same. More silence, more distance, more hurt hidden beneath her daughter's still eyes. The man crouched down when he reached Emily, lowering himself until his knees pressed into the grass. His son stood just behind him, peeking curiously at the girl on the swing. The man didn't rush, didn't fill the air with words. He simply waited until Emily's eyes flickered to his. His voice, when it came, was soft, almost secretive. "Hi there." 2 words, nothing more, no demand, no question that required an answer. Just an opening laid gently in front of her like a stone path. He lifted his hand slightly, palm open, hovering in the space between them. Not close enough to intrude, but near enough to show he was offering, not asking. Olivia felt her breath catch. She wanted to stand, to intercept, to guard Emily from yet another disappointment. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. There was something about the way he looked at her daughter, level, patient, as if he had all the time in the world, that made her pause. He glanced at Olivia then, a flicker of silent communication in his eyes. Permission. He wasn't moving forward without it. And in that fraction of a moment, Olivia did something she hadn't done in years. She waited. She let the silence hold, unsure why, but unable to stop herself. Emily's eyes dropped to his hand. The seconds stretched long, almost unbearable, as if the whole playground leaned in. The squeals of children faded, the creak of swings grew faint, the air itself seemed to thrum with expectation. Olivia's chest tightened, her nails biting into her palm where her phone rested uselessly. Then Emily did something Olivia thought she'd never see. Her tiny hand loosened from the swing chain, trembling slightly, and she placed it, hesitant but deliberate, into the stranger's open palm. The man's smile deepened, not triumphant but tender. His voice came again, low, steady, as if this was the most ordinary moment in the world. "You know," he said, leaning in just enough for her to hear, "my son thinks that slide over there is only for the bravest kids, but I think I've just met someone even braver." Emily blinked, her hand still in his, and for the first time in 3 years, the silence that had bound Olivia's world began to crack, though she didn't yet understand what that sound would become. Che. The air around the swing seemed to shift, as though the world itself was holding its breath. Olivia sat frozen on the bench, her heart hammering in her chest. She had seen this moment before, strangers kneeling, voices gentle, offering games or promises, and every time, Emily had stayed locked in her silence, turning inward until Olivia had to step in and rescue her. She braced for it now, for her daughter to pull away, to shrink back, to remind them all that the silence was unbreakable. But Emily didn't move. Her small hand rested in the stranger's open palm, delicate and trembling, but steady enough to make Olivia's throat tighten. It was such a simple gesture, so ordinary, and yet to her, it was extraordinary. It was contact, chosen, not forced. And Olivia could feel something unravel inside her as she watched, a thread of hope tugged loose after being knotted for years. The man didn't rush to fill the moment with chatter. He didn't praise her loudly or look around for applause. Instead, he let the silence remain, breathing with it, as if he knew it wasn't a void to fear but a space where something fragile could grow. His son shifted beside him, restless but curious, his small fingers tugging at the hem of his hoodie. The man glanced at the boy, then back at Emily, keeping his voice soft. "My son says the tall slide is for the bravest kids," he said, nodding toward the playground's bright red tower. "But I think the bravest kids aren't always the ones who climb the highest. Sometimes they're the ones who just show up, even when it's hard." Olivia's nails dug into her palm, her breath caught halfway between a sob and a prayer. Emily's fingers curled slightly tighter around his hand, her lips pressed together as though something inside her was fighting to come out. The man didn't push, he simply touched the underside of her chin with the gentlest tap, then drew his hand back again, letting her own weight hold the silence. He looked at her with a calm that seemed bottomless. And then it happened. Emily's lips parted, the sound that slipped out faint and shaky, but real enough to slice through 3 years of suffocating quiet. "What's your name?" The words were soft as a feather falling onto glass, but Olivia's heart exploded like thunder. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Her body trembled as the world around her blurred, the squeals of children, the creak of the merry-go-round, the breeze stirring the leaves. None of it mattered. Only those 3 words mattered. Her daughter had spoken. Tears stung her eyes, threatening to spill, but she didn't dare move. She didn't want to scare the moment away, didn't want to interrupt whatever fragile bridge had just formed between her child and this stranger in a faded hoodie. The man's eyes softened, but his reaction was nothing like Olivia expected. He didn't widen his smile into triumph, didn't look over at her for recognition. Instead, he met Emily's whisper with steady warmth, as if she had done the most natural thing in the world. "I'm Jack," he said quietly. He shifted slightly, gesturing to the boy at his side. "And this is Mason, my son." Mason gave a shy wave, his hair sticking out in a wild tangle from the swing. Emily blinked at him, then back at Jack. Her lips moved again, hesitant, her voice a tremor. "I'm Emily." Her name, spoken by her own voice. Olivia's vision blurred with tears. She had heard countless others say Emily's name over the years. Teachers, doctors, therapists, even herself, whispering it like a prayer. But hearing it now, from Emily's own lips, felt like the world itself had split open and remade itself. Jack leaned forward slightly, lowering his tone as though sharing a secret. "The best slide here isn't the big one. It's the little one behind the sandbox. The sun warms it up so you go faster." Emily's brows lifted, a flicker of curiosity breaking across her still face. "Want to try it?" Jack asked gently, his voice steady and low. No rush, no pressure. Emily's eyes darted toward Olivia, searching. Olivia swallowed, her chest tight, and nodded with trembling certainty. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Jack didn't take her hand. He didn't lead. He rose and walked beside her, matching her pace, each step deliberate and unhurried. Mason ran ahead, pointing eagerly toward the hidden slide. Emily followed, careful but sure, her feet pressing into the grass as though relearning the ground. Olivia sat rooted to the bench, watching her daughter walk toward something new, something fragile, but alive. She pressed her hands together against her chest, as if holding her own heart steady. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. For the first time in years, she felt the silence breaking, not just in Emily, but in herself. Something had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hidden slide behind the sandbox wasn't much to look at, short, scuffed, the paint worn thin from years of use. Children usually ignored it in favor of the towering spiral slide that rose like a crown at the center of the playground. But Jack had spoken of this small slide as if it were treasure, and Emily's eyes carried that treasure now, a faint spark that Olivia hadn't seen in 3 years. Mason reached it first, his sneakers kicking up sand as he scrambled to the top ladder. "See? This is the warm one," he said proudly, glancing back at Emily. "It goes faster." His grin was wide, unpolished, a boy's grin that came without effort. He slid down with a whoosh, landing in the sand, laughing breathlessly as if it was the most thrilling ride in the world. Emily stood at the bottom of the ladder, frozen. Her fingers hovered near the rung but didn't grip. She looked up, then back at Jack, uncertain. Jack crouched down again, his hoodie brushing the sand, lowering. He himself to her level without reaching for her hand. "You don't have to," he said simply. "But if you want to, I'll walk right here beside you." Emily's lips pressed together. She swallowed once, then placed her small foot on the first rung. Slowly, carefully, she climbed. Each step seemed heavier than it should, as though she carried years of silence up that small ladder. Olivia's breath caught in her chest, her body leaning forward instinctively from the bench. She had seen her daughter attempt things before, games at therapy centers, exercises at school, each ending with hesitation that crumbled into defeat. She braced for it now, waiting for the moment Emily would stop and retreat. But Emily didn't stop. She reached the top, legs trembling, her small fingers clutching the hot plastic of the slide's edge. Mason clapped his hands, cheering softly. "Go on, Emily, it's easy." Jack stayed silent. He didn't coax or press. He let the quiet breathe. And in that quiet, Emily shifted, sliding herself forward until gravity tugged her down. The slide wasn't long, but in that instant, it became endless. Olivia's heart pounded as Emily shot down, her hair flying, her cheeks flushing pink. She landed in the sand with a soft thud, her eyes wide. For a second, Olivia thought she would cry, overwhelmed by the sudden rush. But then, she laughed. It was small, fragile, but unmistakable. A sound that broke the air like glass shattering into light. Olivia's hands flew to her face, muffling the sob that escaped her throat. That laugh, faint as it was, echoed louder than any boardroom applause, louder than the sound of a company's stocks soaring, louder than anything she had ever achieved. Emily brushed sand from her knees and looked up at Jack, her lips curved in a faint smile, her voice a whisper but steadier than before. "It's warm." Jack grinned, nodding as though they were co-conspirators in a secret. "Told you." Mason tugged Emily's arm lightly. "Again?" She nodded, this time without looking back at her mother for permission. She climbed again, a little quicker, her movements more certain. And again she slid, this time laughing louder, her voice carrying across the sandbox. Mason laughed with her, their sounds mingling like threads weaving together. Olivia sat on the bench, tears slipping freely down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall, unhidden, because the sight before her deserved no pretense. Her daughter was laughing. After 3 years of silence, she was laughing. Jack stood beside her now, his hands in the pocket of his hoodie, his eyes fixed on the children. He leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "She's got a lot she wants to say," he murmured. "She just needs someone to ask the right way." Olivia turned her head, her voice breaking. "How did you do that?" Jack's gaze stayed on Emily, who was climbing the slide for the 3rd time. He shrugged, as if it was the simplest thing in the world. "Sometimes kindness is the only language that works." Olivia looked at him, really looked at him now, the scar on his forearm, the calm steadiness in his eyes, the patience that didn't demand but invited. And in that moment she knew, this wasn't just a stranger at a playground, this was someone who had just opened a door she'd been pounding on for years. And she couldn't let him walk away. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Jack, wait." Emily climbed the slide again, her small body bursting with a determination Olivia hadn't seen in so long that she barely recognized it. Each time she slid down, a faint laugh escaped her lips, thin, delicate, but real. It stitched into Olivia's chest like a needle pulling thread through fabric that had been torn for too many years. Every sound was a reminder that her daughter was still in there, waiting to be reached. But beneath Olivia's awe, another feeling pulsed. Fear. Fear that this moment would vanish as quickly as it appeared. Fear that once they left this playground, the silence would return, heavier than before. She couldn't let that happen. Not now, not after 3 years of begging fate for this one crack in the wall. She turned toward Jack, who stood a few feet away, his eyes on the children. He wasn't smiling for show. His mouth carried a softness that matched the steadiness of his voice. He looked like a man who had lived through storms and learned to stand calmly in the rain. Olivia swallowed, her heart pounding harder than in any boardroom presentation. She could close billion-dollar deals without flinching. But here, asking a simple question felt like stepping off a cliff. "Would you?" Her voice broke, and she tried again. "Would you have coffee with us?" Jack blinked, as if the question had startled him more than it should. He shifted slightly, his hands tightening in the pocket of his hoodie. "Coffee?" "Yes," Olivia said quickly. Too quickly. She hated how desperate she sounded, but she couldn't stop. "My treat, It's been 3 years since I heard her speak." Her voice faltered, cracking on the number. She steadied herself, forcing the CEO mask aside. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a mother's plea. Jack glanced at Mason, who was cheering Emily from the base of the slide, then back at Olivia. His jaw tightened, not with rudeness, but with the weight of a decision. "I don't usually do coffee shops," he said slowly, as though each word cost him something. Olivia leaned forward, the urgency pressing against her ribs. "There's a little place on Oak Street. It's quiet, no crowds, just quiet." The words seemed to settle between them. Quiet, safe. Jack exhaled, a long, steady breath, then gave a short nod. "All right." Olivia almost collapsed with relief, but she held her composure. She turned to Emily, whose cheeks were flushed from climbing and sliding again and again. "Honey, We're going to grab a snack, okay? Emily paused at the top of the slide, her hair catching the sunlight, and looked down at her mother. Can Mason ride in our car? She asked softly. The question knocked the air from Olivia's lungs. It was so normal, so wonderfully ordinary, that for a moment she forgot how to answer. She looked at Jack, searching his face. He smiled gently, grounding the moment with rules that mattered. Maybe next time, kiddo. Today we ride together. Emily nodded, accepting without protest, then slid down once more, landing in the sand with a grin Olivia thought she'd never see again. They walked back toward the parking lot together, Mason running ahead, Emily following close behind. Olivia trailed beside Jack, her mind spinning faster than her steps. Every part of her wanted to thank him, to pour out all the years of grief and the tidal wave of gratitude pressing at her throat. But she held back, knowing instinctively that he wasn't a man who needed grand declarations. He was a man who valued patience. Still, as they reached the cars, she couldn't help herself. You opened a door I've been pounding on for years, she whispered. Jack didn't look at her right away. He unlocked his car for Mason, waited until his son was inside, then finally turned back. His eyes were steady, unreadable, but not unkey. And sometimes doors don't open because they're locked, he said. Sometimes they open when someone knocks the right way. 15 minutes later, the three of them sat in a small booth at a diner on Oak Street. The air smelled faintly of chocolate pie and brewed coffee. Emily and Mason whispered to each other over a shared slice, their voices weaving together like threads of a new friendship. Olivia barely touched her menu. She couldn't stop watching Emily's lips move, words flowing, hesitant, soft, but alive. Across the table, Jack ordered nothing more than black coffee. When the cup arrived, his hand rested on it with a weight that seemed heavier than the porcelain could bear. Olivia noticed the scars on his knuckles, the calluses, and just beneath his sleeve, a faded hospital wristband. He tugged it down quickly, but not before she caught it. Her chest tightened with questions she didn't know how to ask. Who was this man? Why did silence yield to him when it resisted everyone else? And what story did those scars and that wristband hold? Jack lifted the cup, his eyes watching the steam rise. He hadn't said much since they sat down. He didn't need to. His presence alone filled the silence. But Olivia knew she couldn't let this end as just one extraordinary morning at a playground. This wasn't coincidence. This was the beginning of something bigger, though she couldn't yet imagine how much bigger it would become. The diner was quiet, the kind of place where the hum of the ceiling fan and the clink of silverware filled the space more than conversation ever did. Olivia liked it here. It wasn't sleek like the restaurants she was used to, with spotless marble and curated playlists, but it was safe, simple, a place where time seemed to slow down, where her daughter's soft voice didn't have to compete with the world. Emily and Mason sat across from her, shoulders pressed together as they shared a slice of pie. Mason nudged the bigger piece toward Emily, who hesitated before taking it, then gave. A faint laugh at his exaggerated look of mock sacrifice. Olivia's heart swelled at the sound. She wanted to memorize it, carve it into her bones because it had been so long since she'd heard it. But her eyes kept drifting to Jack. He sat beside Mason, shoulders slightly hunched, fingers curled around a chipped white mug of coffee. He wasn't talking, not filling the air with unnecessary words. He was just there, present, steady, like an anchor in a storm. His hands fascinated her, large, strong, marked with scars that spoke of a life lived far outside the walls of boardrooms, and that glimpse of a hospital wristband still pressed against her mind. Finally, she spoke, her voice more invitation than question. Were you just in the hospital? For a moment, Jack didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the rising steam from his cup, as if measuring whether or not to let her in. Olivia didn't push. She let the silence stretch, giving him the same patience he had given her daughter. Then he nodded, his voice low and even. I just got out of VA rehab about a month ago. The words settled heavily between them. Olivia's fingers curled against the table edge. She hadn't expected that. Jack set the cup down gently, as though even that act required control. I used to be a paramedic, he said. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Last one, our truck hit an IED. He paused, his jaw tightening before he forced himself to go on. My legs took most of it. My best friend didn't make it. Olivia's throat closed. She whispered, I'm sorry. Jack gave the faintest nod, his gaze steady on the black coffee in front of him. Since then, loud noise knocks me sideways. Crowds, sirens, even the TV. That's why I stay on the edge of town with Mason. Quieter there, easier to breathe. He shifted, his sleeve riding up again, revealing the faint band of skin where the wristband had been. This time he didn't tug it down. I started volunteering at the park, not because I thought I could save anyone, but because kids... He trailed off, then finished. Kids reflect back what you give them. If you're steady, they feel steady. If you're patient, they know it's safe to take their time. Olivia studied him, her chest tightening. This wasn't just about playground kindness. This was a man carrying invisible wars, yet he still chose to kneel in the sand for children who weren't his own. Jack lifted the cup again, but before he could drink, Mason piped up, crumbs on his chin. Dad helps kids breathe when they get scared. He says it works for him, too. Emily glanced at Mason curiously, then back at Jack. She whispered, "You help kids?" Jack turned to her, his expression softening. "Sometimes. But mostly, kids help me." The words lingered in the air like truth too simple to dismiss. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. She was a woman who built systems, who led hundreds of employees, who sought efficiency in every corner of life. And yet here was this man, saying that healing wasn't something you engineered, it was something you shared. Her gaze flicked to Emily, who was leaning in toward Mason now, listening as he tried to teach her how to balance a fork upright in a mound of pie. A game, a moment of lightness, and her daughter was part of it. Olivia swallowed hard, then looked back at Jack. "You don't realize what you've done," she whispered. Jack's lips curved faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "I didn't do anything sad. Peschel. I just sat low, opened my hand, and waited. Sometimes that's all it takes." Olivia shook her head, her voice trembling. "No, I've taken her everywhere. Therapists, specialists, doctors. I run a med tech company that designs tools for communication. I've bought every device they've recommended. None of it worked. But you..." Her voice cracked, and she pressed her palm to her chest. "You broke 3 years of silence in 5 minutes." Jack's eyes flicked up, meeting hers for the first time since he began talking about the past. There was no pride in his expression, no arrogance, just quiet conviction. "That's because you can't fix silence with tools," he said. "You fix it with safety." Olivia froze, his words hitting harder than any business insight she'd ever paid to hear. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope that maybe this wasn't permanent. Maybe her daughter's silence wasn't a prison after all. She wanted to ask him more. Everything. About his methods, about the way he waited, about how he turned pain into something steady enough for a child to lean on. But before she could speak, the kitchen door swung open and a plate crashed to the floor. Jack flinched, his shoulders tensing. His breath caught, sharp. Mason immediately touched his father's arm, steadying him with a quiet nod. Jack exhaled slowly, grounding himself, his hand pressed flat against the table until his body steadied. Emily's eyes went wide, her breathing quickening. But then she looked at Mason, copying the rhythm of his exaggerated inhale and exhale. Slowly, her body softened too. Olivia's chest ached as she watched, not just because her daughter was learning how to breathe through fear, but because she realized she was learning as well. Jack had shown them both. The plate shattered against the tile, a sharp crack that sliced through the diner's gentle hum. Conversations dipped, silverware stilled, and then the noise returned. Clinking, chatter, laughter. But at the small booth near the window, the world stopped. Jack's body went rigid, shoulders drawn tight as if someone had pulled invisible strings. His breath caught halfway, his jaw clenched. For a moment, Olivia saw something raw flash across his face. A memory, a battlefield echo, something far from this quiet corner cafe. His hand pressed against the table, palm flat, grounding himself. Mason didn't flinch. He leaned slightly closer, his little hand brushing his father's sleeve, steady but not clingy. A small nod, practiced and calm. Jack drew in a slow breath, chest rising, then released it in a long, measured exhale. His shoulders loosened, just slightly. The storm that had tried to pull him under receded. Emily, sitting across from them, froze. Her wide eyes darted from the fragments of ceramic on the floor to Jack's face. Her lips parted, but no words came, her chest rising in short, shallow bursts. For a moment, Olivia feared they'd lose everything they'd gained today, that the sound of breaking porcelain would seal her daughter's voice back inside forever. But Mason exaggerated his breathing now, making it visible, almost playful. He inhaled deeply, puffing his cheeks like a balloon, then let the air out in a long hiss, shoulders dropping dramatically. He did it again, turning it into a rhythm. Emily's eyes followed him. Her small body mirrored the motion. Inhale, hold, exhale, again. Slowly, her breath matched his. Her shoulders lowered. The fear in her eyes softened, replaced by something steadier. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth, muffling the sound that escaped. She had never seen this before, her daughter regulating herself, not retreating into silence, not aching under the weight of it, all because a boy and his father had shown her a pattern, a rhythm, a way back to safety. Jack leaned forward, his voice low and steady, the tone of a man who knew the power of measured calm. "You're okay," he said to Emily, not loud, not dramatic. "You did great." Emily's chin dipped in the faintest nod. Then, almost shyly, she whispered, "I breathed again." The words cracked Olivia's heart wide open. She pressed her hands against her chest, tears stinging her eyes. 3 years of silence, broken twice in one day, not with pressure, not with therapy, but with safety, with breath. Mason snapped his fingers in a playful click, grinning at Emily. "Exactly right." Olivia looked at Jack, her voice trembling. "You didn't just calm her down. You gave her something she can use when I'm not there. That's more than any doctor has ever given us." Jack shook his head lightly, his gaze still steady. "It's nothing fancy, just teaching the body to trust the moment again." He took another slow sip of coffee as if that explained everything. But to Olivia, it explained nothing, and yet everything. Her mind spun. She thought of her company's endless prototypes, devices designed to encourage communication, apps that tracked progress, sensors that monitored stress, charts and graphs meant to measure breakthroughs. But none of them could do what she had just witnessed. A man lowering his voice, a child modeling calm, another child finding her way back. Olivia leaned in, her eyes searching Jack's face. "You have a system, don't you? A way you know when to wait, when to breathe, when to step in?" Jack gave the faintest smile, but his eyes flickered with something else. Wariness. "I've picked up a few things, yeah. Nothing I'd call a system. But it is." Olivia pressed softly, her voice careful, respectful. "You crouch low, you open your hand, you wait, you breathe. You don't force, you model. That's not instinct, that's a method. I've watched therapists and specialists try, but no one has done what you just did. You have a code, even if you don't call it that." Jack was quiet, his thumb running along the edge of his mug. He didn't deny it, he didn't confirm it either. But Olivia saw the truth in his silence. He wasn't guessing, he was guiding. She looked at her daughter, at the pink in her cheeks, at the soft curve of her lips that had forgotten how to smile until today. Then she looked back at Jack. Her voice was firmer now, steady with the force of both mother and CEO. "I want to learn it," she said. "Not just for Emily, for every child like her, for every parent who's been drowning in silence. You have something no one else has, Jack, and the world needs it." For the first time, Jack met her gaze head-on. His eyes were dark, steady, but shadowed. He looked at her as though weighing her words against a lifetime of reasons not to believe them. Then he set his mug down, slow and deliberate, and said, "Sometimes silence isn't meant to be broken with words. Sometimes it's meant to be broken with safety. That's the only code I know." Olivia exhaled shakily, her heart pounding. She knew in that moment that this wasn't chance. This man wasn't just a stranger at a playground. He was holding a key, not only to Emily's voice, but to a language the world had forgotten how to speak. The diner had emptied some, the morning rush giving way to a lull. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, dust motes drifting in the golden beams. Olivia barely noticed. She was still holding her breath, her body tight from the weight of what she had just seen. Emily was whispering again, her voice faint, halting but present, while Mason leaned close as though they had always been friends. Jack sat quietly across from her, his mug now half empty, his posture loose but his presence sharp, as though he felt every detail in the room. Olivia studied him, the way his calm radiated outward, the way his silence was not absence but something deliberate. She had built a company on communication technology, on finding ways to bridge gaps, and yet here was a man who had used no tools, no devices, no algorithms. He had simply crouched low, opened his hand, and waited, and it had worked. Olivia leaned forward, her voice soft but charged with urgency. "You have something real, Jack. A method, a framework. You might not call it that, but I can see it." Jack gave a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A method?" he repeated, as if the word felt too heavy for what he had done. "I just noticed things, that's all." "No," Olivia said firmly, her CEO's voice slipping through despite the tremor in her chest. "You don't just notice. You observe before you move. You give permission instead of commands. You model calm instead of forcing it. That's not chance. That's discipline." Jack let out a quiet exhale, his gaze flicking to Emily, then back to her. Discipline, huh? That's a word I thought I left behind in the desert. He rubbed his thumb across the handle of his mug. But you're not wrong. I do follow a rhythm, not because I planned it, but because I had to. Olivia leaned closer, her voice lowering. Tell me. Jack was silent for a long moment, his shoulders rising and falling in a slow breath. His eyes darkened, as if reaching back into memories he didn't often revisit. After the blast, I couldn't breathe. My chest would lock, my ears would ring, and the world would close in. Mason was just a toddler then. He'd cry whenever I froze. I didn't want him growing up afraid of me, so I had to figure something out. Little by little, I learned to anchor myself. Slow breath, open hands, lower my body so I wasn't a threat. And then one day, I tried it with my sister's daughter. She'd stopped talking after their dad left. It worked for her, too. His voice softened. That's when I realized, silence isn't about broken voices. It's about broken safety. If a child doesn't feel safe, they won't speak. No device can fix that, but presence can. Olivia's throat tightened. She thought of all the prototypes her company had spent millions on. Apps, sensors, tablets, and how many times she had brought Emily into white rooms full of strangers holding clipboards, only to watch her retreat further into herself. Broken safety, Jack had said. That was it. That was the missing piece. Jack tapped a finger against the table, sketching invisible letters. If you want to call it a method, fine. But it's not fancy. I just think of it like this. SAFE. See, ask, follow, empower. Olivia's breath caught. He said it so casually, but the words hit her like a revelation. SAFE, she repeated, tasting the letters, her mind already racing ahead to applications, frameworks, training modules. See, ask, follow, empower. That's it. Jack shook his head lightly. That's not it. That's just the bones. The heart of it is patience. You can't rush a child into safety. You can't command trust. You build it, one breath at a time. Olivia's fingers curled against the table. She wanted to reach across, to shake his hand, to sign a contract right there, but she forced herself to slow down. For the first time in years, she wasn't just thinking as a CEO. She was thinking as a mother. And as a mother, she knew she couldn't let this man vanish from her life. Jack, she whispered, her voice breaking. Do you understand what you've done for us today? What you've done for Emily? Jack looked at her steadily, his dark eyes calm, unflinching. I didn't fix her. She fixed herself. I just gave her the space to try. Olivia swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. No, you gave her safety, and no one has ever managed to do that for her before. Emily's laughter rang out then, faint but clear, as Mason leaned back and made a silly face, pie crumbs still clinging to his lips. Olivia turned her head, and for a moment she let the sound wash over her, soaking into the cracks of her weary heart. But when she looked back at Jack, she saw something else. The scars, the faded wristband, the haunted stillness behind his calm. This wasn't just about Emily. This was about him too. He carried his own silence, his own battles, and somehow in healing others, he was holding himself together. Olivia realized then that what she had stumbled into wasn't just a personal miracle. It was something bigger, a framework, a language, a truth that could change lives far beyond this booth in a small-town diner. But she also knew it wouldn't be easy. She could already imagine the pushback, boards demanding numbers, investors asking for metrics, skeptics dismissing patience as inefficiency. And she could see Jack, reluctant, wary of being turned into someone's project. Still, as she looked at her daughter whispering secrets to Mason across the table, Olivia made a silent vow. Whatever it took, she would fight for this. For Emily, for every child like her, for a world where silence could be broken not by force, but by safety. And for the first time in 3 years, hope didn't feel like a lie. It felt like the beginning of a revolution. The following Monday, Olivia Hayes walked into her company's headquarters with a strange mix of nerves and certainty thrumming beneath her polished exterior. For years, she had arrived in these glass towers armored in control, heels clicking, voice firm, every detail of her presence calculated to project command. But today felt different. Today, she wasn't just a CEO marching into another week of deliverables and quarterly projections. Today, she was a mother carrying a secret, one she was about to share with her company. Jack walked beside her, a step slower, as though the bright lobby itself were a battlefield he hadn't chosen. The soaring glass walls, the polished marble, the buzz of professionals moving with purpose. It was everything Olivia knew by heart, but she noticed Jack's shoulders tense at the constant hum, the clicking heels, the beeping scanners at security. Mason wasn't with him. He had insisted his son stay at school, normal routine intact. But Olivia caught how Jack's hands brushed the seams of his faded hoodie, fingers fidgeting as if tracing invisible scars. At reception, the front desk clerk reached for his visitor badge. The scanner beeped once, then froze. "Sorry," the clerk said with polite detachment, trying again. A longer beep, hesitant. Two employees behind them breezed through with a cheerful ding and a nod. Jack kept his expression neutral, but Olivia saw it. The faint tightening of his jaw, the slow exhale through his nose. She wanted to snap at the clerk, to demand urgency, but she bit her tongue. She would save her energy for something bigger, proving to everyone inside these walls that Jack Carter was not just another guest, not another consultant. He was the answer they didn't know they needed. The lab was tucked in the quieter wing of the building. No glass walls here, no open floors buzzing with chatter. She had chosen it deliberately. See, sound-dampened panels, warm lighting, fabric chairs instead of chrome, a place that breathed instead of shouted. Inside, her core team was waiting. Ethan Brooks, their sharp systems engineer, Claire Morgan, product PM with a reputation for precision, Dr. Laura Patel, a speech therapist who had seen countless failed tools, and a few younger engineers eager but skeptical. Ethan started bluntly, arms crossed. "We want to understand your framework. If it's going to be part of our product, we need it to be repeatable, measurable, not fuzzy." Jack didn't bristle. He just picked up a marker, turned to the whiteboard, and wrote 4 large letters. S.A.F.E. His voice was calm, his stance steady. See, ask, follow, empower. He underlined each letter as he spoke. See, observe before you speak. Shoulders tight, hands clenched, eyes darting. You don't move forward until the body tells you it's ready. Ask, open questions, not commands. Do you want to instead of do this? Follow, don't pull a child. Walk beside them, let them set the pace. Empower, recognize small wins. Don't make their voice a performance. Let them own it. The room was quiet. Even Ethan had lowered his arms. Claire leaned forward, scribbling notes. "Can you codify signs for readiness?" Jack nodded, writing beneath S. Shoulders drop, breath steadier, gaze less darting, hands unclench. He turned back to them. "If you don't see at least 2 of these, don't move on. Safety comes first." Dr. Patel raised her hand slightly. "What about sudden triggers? Loud noises, smells, unexpected touches?" Jack didn't hesitate. He drew a quick sketch of a balloon. Step 1, drop to eye level. Step 2, model the 4-2-6 breath. Step 3, give a focal point. Look at my hands or count hats in the room. Step 4, bring in a peer to model. Step 5, once calm returns, shift gently. Sometimes, stopping is the intervention. His calm filled the room like a tide rolling in. Olivia watched her team, skeptical at first, begin to lean forward. She knew what they were feeling. The same thing she had felt at the playground, the undeniable sense that this wasn't theory, this was lived, tested, and true. Still, Ethan frowned. "It's all instinct. Where are the metrics?" Jack's mouth curved faintly, not defensive, almost amused. He wrote in block letters, "Measure what you can in service of what you need to protect. Time to stability, from trigger to steady breath. Number of times a child initiates communication, number of breakthrough moments per session, verbal or nonverbal, ratio of interventions delayed rather than forced. Metrics aren't for pushing progress, they're for knowing when to wait." The words hung heavy in the room. Olivia could see the subtle nods now, the way even Ethan's typing had slowed. Then came the real test. Dr. Patel smiled gently. "We have a little girl from our trial group arriving this afternoon. Nora, age 6. She hasn't spoken since her father left last year. Would you try?" Jack capped the marker, his face unreadable. "I'll sit with her, but she sets the pace." When Nora arrived hours later, she clung to her mother's sleeve, eyes fixed on the floor. Jack didn't rush to greet her. He crouched low, palms open, voice quiet. "I'm Jack. Want to sit near Mason?" Because he had brought Mason this time, knowing a child might trust another child more than any adult. Nora didn't answer, but she inched half a step closer. That was enough. Jack didn't move, just matched her breath, slow and steady. The silence stretched. Olivia noticed her team fidgeting, shifting in their chairs. 30 seconds passed. Jack stayed still. Finally, Nora bent to touch the corner of a block Mason had left in the middle of the rug. The tiniest step, but a step. Just as Jack was about to respond, a printer in the corner clicked loudly, spitting paper. Nora jumped, eyes wide, retreating back to her mother. Olivia's stomach clenched. This was it, the breaking point. Jack raised his hands gently in Nora's line of sight. Look at my hands, he said, soft, patient. He modeled the breath. Inhale, hold, long exhale. Mason copied him, exaggerating. Slowly, painfully, Nora followed. Her shoulders eased, her eyes lifted, and she whispered, barely audible, green. She was pointing at a block. Olivia nearly sobbed. 3 years of leading teams, millions spent on prototypes, and one man with open hands and steady breath had just done more in a minute than years of clinical effort. But then Jack looked at the printer and shook his head. His voice was steady, but Olivia heard the undertone of regret. I should have stopped the environment first. That's on me. And with those words, the method shifted again. Not just safe, something more, a mistake that would change the framework forever. The room was still vibrating with the echo of the printer's clack, though the machine had already gone quiet. Nora stood tucked against her mother's side, her fingers tangled tight in the fabric of her sleeve. She wasn't crying, but her small chest rose too fast, her eyes darting. Olivia felt her own breath shallow as she watched, every protective instinct firing. She wanted to leap forward, to soothe the child, to repair what had cracked. But Jack didn't leap. He didn't rush in with apologies or promises. He crouched low again, palms open, voice steady and low. Look at my hands, Nora. Inhale, hold, exhale. His tone carried no urgency, just a steady rhythm. Mason copied, puffing out his cheeks dramatically, letting the breath out slow. Nora's eyes flicked to him, then back to Jack. She mimicked the motion, a tiny wisp of air leaving her lips. Shoulders dropped. The storm receded. Jack gave a small nod, not overpraising, just anchoring the moment. That's it. You chose to breathe. That's brave. Nora loosened her grip on her mother's sleeve and touched the block again. Her lips parted. Yellow. A whisper, but real. Olivia pressed a hand to her mouth, her throat burning. 2 words, after months of silence. This was it. The breakthrough she had begged for, invested in, prayed for. But instead of triumph, Jack's face carried something else. Regret. He sat back on his heels, exhaling long. I moved in too fast, he said quietly. I should have stopped the noise before asking her to breathe. Ethan frowned, confused. But she spoke. That's a win. Jack shook his head. No, it worked this time, but I put her through more than she needed. I made her fight against the environment and her fear. That's on me. He turned to the board, picking up the marker again. Beside the big R.S.A.F.E, he added another letter, R. Remove or reduce. Stimuli first, always. He underlined it, the squeak of the marker loud in the silent room. Before you see, before you ask, before you follow, make the world safe enough for them to even try. If the room's too loud, quiet it. If the smell's too sharp, clear it. If the lights are too harsh, soften them. Then start safe. The whiteboard now read R.S.A.F.E. Claire tilted her head, her voice curious. So if we had stopped the printer first, she wouldn't have had to recover from. The shock, Jack said. She could have stayed steady the whole time. Dr. Patel leaned forward, eyes wide with understanding. You're right. We're so trained to respond to the child that we forget to change the room. But trauma lives in environments too. This changes everything. Olivia felt her heart race. She could see it so clearly now. Her company's tools redesigned not as pressure devices, but as protectors. Sensors that lowered lights automatically, apps with a big red stop button to pause prompts, wearables that alerted adults when heart rate spiked, not to push harder, but to pull back. For years, she had told her team they were building bridges. Now she realized they'd been building traffic instead. Jack had just handed her the blueprint for the bridge they truly needed. Victor Hale, her CFO, would scoff at this. He'd ask about ROI, revenue, scalability. But Olivia wasn't thinking like a CEO anymore. She was thinking like a mother whose child had laughed again, like a woman watching a war veteran rewrite the language of safety in real time. Jack capped the marker, setting it down with finality. From now on, it's not safe. It's R.S.A.F.E. Remove first, then see, ask, follow, empower. Silence filled the lab, not heavy this time, charged. Ethan typed furiously, muttering, "We can build this into the software. Environmental sensors, stop functions, visual cues." Claire scribbled notes, eyes bright. "We'll test a quiet zone checklist in real homes." Dr. Patel nodded, her voice trembling. "Do you realize how many therapists have been waiting for language like this?" Olivia stood at the edge of the whiteboard, her chest tight, her vision blurring. She thought of Emily whispering, "What's your name?" on the swing, of her laughter on the warm slide, of her whispering, "I breathed again" in the diner after the plate shattered. and now of Nora whispering green, yellow. Chad had a chain of moments, fragile but unbreakable, all linked by this man in a faded hoodie. Her voice came soft, but it carried across the room like a vow. This isn't just a framework. This is going to change everything. Jack's gaze flicked to her, wary. Don't turn it into a poster, Olivia. Don't make it about me. Make it about the kids. Olivia nodded, her throat too tight for more words. She wasn't sure yet how, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. She would fight for this, for Emily, for children like Nora, for every family who had been drowning in silence. And for the first time in years, the silence in her own chest didn't feel like defeat. It felt like possibility. The boardroom on the 10th floor gleamed with glass walls and a skyline view, the kind of room designed to intimidate. Olivia had walked into it hundreds of times before, armed with polished slides, sharp numbers, and a voice that cut through hesitation like a blade. But today, her armor felt different. It wasn't the kind she wore to dominate a quarterly earnings report. Today, she carried something fragile yet unstoppable, a framework scribbled on a whiteboard that had already changed her daughter's life. The board members were already seated. Victor Hale, CFO, leaned back in his chair, fingers tapping his Mont Blanc pen like a metronome of skepticism. Sabrina Whitfield, the board chair, sat with a calm but assessing posture, her sharp eyes scanning the agenda. Diane Cruz from Communications clicked her pen idly, restless. Around them were faces Olivia knew too well, seasoned investors who valued numbers over nuance, ROI over raw humanity. Jack sat at the far end of the long oak table, shoulders square but still, his faded hoodie and worn jeans stark against the tailored suits around him. He hadn't wanted to be here. Olivia knew that. But she also knew he was the only one who could embody the truth she was about to fight for. The lights dimmed slightly as Claire queued up the presentation. Charts filled the screen, lines sloping, bars rising, percentages ticking upward. Olivia spoke with controlled precision. In the first trial sessions using RS.A.F.E, recovery time from triggers dropped by 32%. Participation in activities rose by 70%. Breakthroughs, verbal or nonverbal, nearly doubled. And most importantly, for the first time, children initiated communication without prompts. Victor leaned forward, tapping his pen. Participation, recovery time. Those are nice. But where is the revenue? How long until this turns into product value? We can't sell feelings, Olivia. Olivia's pulse quickened, but she kept her face steady. She gestured toward the screen where two short video clips played side by side. On the left, a boy huddled under a table, unresponsive to repeated verbal prompts. On the right, the same boy, 2 sessions later, crawling out voluntarily after Jack modeled calm breathing with Mason. He reached for a block, placed it deliberately, and whispered, "Blue." "This," Olivia said, her voice sharp with conviction, "is the value. You're looking at a child reclaiming his right to participate. Without participation, every device we build is just a microphone for silence. RS.A.F.E doesn't replace our technology, it makes it work." Sabrina tilted her head. "And what exactly is RS.A.F.E? Jack finally spoke, his voice steady, unpolished, but undeniable. "Remove, see, ask, follow, empower. It's not about forcing speech, it's about creating safety. Remove what overwhelms. See before you speak. Ask instead of command. Follow their pace. Empower them to own their progress. It's not a script, it's a way of showing up." Diane Cruz from Communications leaned forward, eyes narrowing with opportunity. "If we frame this right, the story alone could carry our brand. A combat medic turned children's coach, healing trauma with presence. Imagine the headlines." She slid her pen across her notebook. "Your face on the posters, Jack. Bold letters, battlefield to playground. It'll sell." The air shifted. Jack's jaw tightened, but he didn't raise his voice. "I'm not a poster. I don't want my story turned into bait. This isn't about me. It's about children. If you want a symbol, use an open hand, a glass of warm water, a stop button, things anyone can do." Olivia felt a heat rise in her chest. She looked straight at Diane. "No posters, no exploitation. RS.A.F.E is about method, not mythology. We're not selling Jack Carter. We're building a culture of safety." Victor snorted, unimpressed. "Fine words, but I want numbers. When will retention rise? How much will support costs drop?" Claire, calm but firm, flipped to the next slide. "Small-scale pilots already show a 21% reduction in average support time. Parent retention sessions are up 28% with the Quiet Zone checklist. Our 12-week target is 20% improvement in both. If we meet it, we scale. Victor arched a brow. And if you don't? Olivia stepped forward, her heels silent on the carpet. Her voice was clear, unwavering. If we don't, I'll take responsibility before the board, not the team, me. A hush spread across the room. The city skyline glowed gold behind her, the late sun reflecting off the glass. For years, she had fought battles over margins, market share, expansion strategies. But this was different. This was her daughter's laughter on a warm slide. This was a whisper of, I breathed again. This was safety turned into a language the world had forgotten. Sabrina's eyes lingered on Olivia, sharp and measuring. Then, slowly, she nodded. You'll get your 12-week pilot, but Olivia, you've just staked your name on this. Don't falter. I won't, Olivia said softly, her eyes flicking to Jack. Because I know what's at stake. Jack held her gaze for a beat. He didn't smile, but something eased in his expression. A recognition, perhaps, that she wasn't just another executive chasing numbers. She was a mother willing to risk everything for the sound of her daughter's voice. And though the board didn't yet realize it, the real ROI had already begun. The return of something no ledger could calculate. Trust, presence, and the possibility of healing. The morning of the pilot launch broke warm and golden, sunlight filtering through a canopy of trees that shaded the small park on the east side of town. It didn't look like a corporate rollout. No flashing screens, no big stage with microphones. Instead, white tents fluttered gently in the breeze. A banner read simply, Safe Corner, RS.A.F.E. for families. There were no booming speeches. Olivia had insisted on that. Instead, volunteers guided parents to shaded spaces where water bottles sat in neat rows, smooth stones lay in baskets, and a small slide had been placed where the sun warmed it just right. The hum of a coffee cart mixed with children's laughter. For once, it wasn't about spectacle. It was about presence. Olivia walked slowly through the park, Emily's small hand tucked into hers. She couldn't stop glancing down, couldn't stop marveling at how her daughter's lips curved upward, how her steps carried more certainty now. Just weeks ago, Emily had been locked in silence, unreachable. Today, she tugged her mother toward the tent, her eyes bright with anticipation. Jack stood by one of the canopies, wearing the same faded navy hoodie. His name tag didn't boast a title, just read, Jack Carter, Psychological Safety Coach. Mason stood proudly at his side, holding a football like a badge of belonging. Parents lined up not to ask for photos, but to whisper real questions. What do I do when the blender sets my son off? When the smell of disinfectant makes my daughter cry? Jack's answers were never complicated. Step into the shade, offer warm water, ask if they want space closer or farther, name 2 things they see, 2 things they hear, let them breathe. He spoke with a steady rhythm, simple, repeatable, like teaching people to tie knots that could hold in a storm. Emily and Mason were invited to be peer partners for the other kids. Olivia stood back, heart swelling as she watched her daughter lean down toward a younger boy, showing him how to grip the seams of the football with his fingers. Like this, Emily whispered. The boy copied her, and for the first time, he threw straight. His mother's sob escaped into the quiet, but no one stared. A volunteer simply touched her arm gently, giving her space to breathe too. It was working, not just the method, the culture. Inside a fabric-draped tent, families were invited to write 1 sentence they wished their child could say. Then, if the child wanted, read it aloud in private with a volunteer at eye level. No stage, no applause, just a sacred moment. Emily held her paper close to her chest, looking at her mother. Do you want me close or waiting outside? Olivia asked, her voice trembling. Close, Emily whispered. Together they stepped into the tent. Emily unfolded her paper, the words scrawled in uneven letters. She took a shaky breath. I'm Emily. I like the warm slide. The words fell soft, but steady. The volunteer nodded, smiling. Olivia's tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She didn't clap, didn't gasp. She just breathed with her daughter, holding the space sacred. Later, at the pie stand set up under the trees, Jack placed something on the table, his old medic patch, edges frayed from years of wear. Beside it, 2 drawings, stick figures Emily and Mason had made with stars and hearts for Mr. Marcus, Jack's fallen friend, and a note card that read, If you have someone to remember, write 1 line, then anchor yourself before folding it away. Parents came quietly, leaving small scraps of paper. For my mom, for my brother, for my son, each folded carefully, placed under the weight of the patch. By noon, Sabrina Whitfield and even Victor Hale had arrived unannounced. They stood at the edge of the shade, watching as parents used the stop button on the updated app to pause prompts, lead their children into the quiet zone, then return without shame. A live chart at the coordination desk showed it all. Median recovery time down to 2 minutes 31 seconds. Participation after pause, 76%. Victor's usual smirk was gone. He leaned toward Sabrina, murmuring, "That's the ROI of dignity." But the most powerful proof wasn't in the numbers. It was in Emily. She ran across the grass with Mason laughing, then hurried back to Jack, tugging his sleeve. "I have a speak when needed for you," she whispered. Jack crouched to her level, his hands open. "I'm listening." Emily's eyes shone as she said, "When I'm scared, I fall safe. When I'm okay, I fly." Olivia's breath said, "Ought." The words were simple, childlike, but they were also the heartbeat of RS.A.F.E. distilled into a single truth. Jack's eyes glistened, though he blinked it away. His voice came steady, but softer than before. "I learned that from you. When I'm scared, I stop and breathe. When I'm okay, I help someone else fly." Olivia's chest tightened with emotion so fierce she had to look away for a second. She knew she had found more than a collaborator. She had found a compass, one who had guided her daughter back to voice, and who, in the process, had given her the language to rebuild a company's soul. As the sun dipped lower, tents were folded, stones packed away, water bottles emptied. But Olivia knew this wasn't an ending. Healing wasn't a period, it was an ellipsis, a story that kept unfolding. Jack's final words echoed in her mind as they left the park. Bravery isn't just speaking when needed, it's knowing when to stop, when to cry, and when to fly. And for the first time in 3 years, Olivia Hayes didn't feel like she was pretending at control. She felt like she was finally free,